You're listening to the Baumbastic Podcast with Andrew Ellis on Inside Arkansas.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Baumbastic Podcast presented by Inside Arkansas and hosted by Andrew Ellis. We are joined by a very special guest on today's program, Peter Flaherty of Baseball America. Did I get the name right? Did that sound good, Flaherty?
Nailed it. Like Jack Flaherty. I wish we were related, but we're not. But you nailed it.
The exact name I had in my brain where I was like, I'm just hoping it's pronounced like Jack Flaherty, honestly. I know there's a lot of Hog fans who love the Cardinals, so they'll love that as well. But a special guest on today's program, a guy who knows ball for sure, and that's a prerequisite. You got to know ball if you're going to be on this program. But as I said, works for Baseball America, covers the MLB Draft, covers college baseball. Not many people doing it as consistently and as well as him. I use his work all the time. I was just telling him, I was like, man, I use your work. Anytime you say something good about the Hogs, I always got to cite it because I know Hog fans love to have people telling them they're awesome. And, you know, it's one thing for me to say that Wehiwa Aloy is good at baseball, but when a professional like yourself says Wehiwa Aloy is good at baseball, it hits different because we can't just look at Wehiwa and know he's good. We got to have people that know it and say it. So I appreciate you for joining me, man. I know it's a busy time for you, time of year for you with the draft coming up, but I appreciate you joining us on the Baumbastic Podcast.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me on, and thanks so much for the far too kind intro. That was a good tire pump. I'll take the I know ball compliment and me being a professional. I'll hold that one for a while.
Absolutely, man. Well, seriously, man, appreciate you for being here, man. And this time of year, man, with the draft coming up, there's a lot to talk about, obviously, and I think you're one of the top in the business. You and Baseball America do a great job covering the sport, you know, just college baseball in general, but also knowing about these prospects from a draft standpoint. So we'll just jump right into it with Wehiwa Aloy, who, you know, I'm sure the fans have heard of a little bit. From your perspective, obviously, Arkansas fans have gotten to watch his Razorback career, and we've seen him kind of grow up and seen him evolve a little bit as a player. When did Wehiwa Aloy first get onto your radar? Like at what age during his development, and what have you seen from him throughout his college career that has kind of, I guess, answered some questions that maybe some draft guys have had?
Sure. I mean, he popped onto my radar, and I think a lot of people's radars, including Coach Van Horn and the rest of the Arkansas coaching staff, sort of in the middle of his freshman year at Sacramento State when he was performing really well. He ended up hitting .376 with 15 doubles and 14 homers, and then, you know, for better or worse, it's kind of the way of the college game nowadays. He unsurprisingly hit the portal and then, you know, made waves when he committed to Arkansas. Had a little bit of some growing pains transitioning into the SEC last year, but I caught him a few times last summer on Cape Cod. He was one of the better hitters out here, hit over 300 with 8 homers. And then he did what he did this year and hit .350 with 19 doubles and 21 homers. So I think the two main questions surrounding Wehiwa that, you know, he's answered a little bit during his career and he'll have to continue to answer as he progresses to pro ball is, you know, how good and how polished can the hit tool be and can he stick at shortstop? Now, I wouldn't necessarily say he's a slam dunk to stick at shortstop, but I feel a whole lot better about him sticking at shortstop now than I did even heading into this season, let alone this time last year. The actions have gotten better. The internal clock has gotten better. The arm strength has always been there with him. So, I mean, he's going to get every chance he can to prove he can stick there professionally. And then as far as the hit tool goes, still needs a coat or two of polish, as I alluded to, particularly as it comes to picking up spin and picking up shapes out of the hand. Those are kind of his two big bugaboos. But the swing decision's improved from last year to this year, so the trend is his friend in that regard. And you can train yourself. You know, you can train seeing shapes. You can train picking up spin. So he's a high caliber makeup kind of kid. I know he's going to get after it. And then the power is, you know, it's comfortably plus raw, but I think even more impressively, it's plus in game. And he's not this metal bat merchant. Like the power with him is real. Like it's plus in game that he has no problem getting to. Posted a max EV this year, I think, of 114. But more importantly, had a 90th percentile exit velocity of almost 109, consistently on the barrel, thunderous bat speed. It's a slam dunk first round profile for me.
Love that. Yeah, and I feel like there was, you know, when he first got to Arkansas, it was weird because, you know, like we do with all these guys, as soon as we find out who they are, we start Googling them, looking at stats and figuring out. I think he made like 15 or 16 errors his freshman year at Sacramento State, and I don't know what kind of surface they were playing on. But that was like kind of a huge thing. Even when he was coming to Arkansas, we were like, are we sure this guy's going to play shortstop at the collegiate level? And I remember talking to Wehiwa about that when he was at the fall, his first fall at Arkansas. And he was like, yeah, most of my errors were throwing errors. And he was like, honestly, one practice with DVH, and like he we cleaned up a little bit of like just the, how I was delivering it over there. And he's like, I haven't made a throwing error since. And he's like, I think I'm fine. And I was like, kind of like, it can't be that simple, right? But then you look at him at Arkansas, I made like 9 errors in 2 seasons. You're like, well, maybe it really was that simple. And I think you mentioned the power. I think it definitely gives him a lot of breathing room a little bit, because you just know a guy on the infield that's going to hit for that level of power. Of course, he's going to have to answer the questions with the hit tool, like you said, but it's like that alone, sticking at shortstop and having that power, and now he's kind of the new build of like modern shortstops. It's a pretty good base to start from. And I feel like worst case scenario, you're looking at like a third baseman that really has a ton of power, like worst case. And I do think he's going to be able to stick at shortstop defensively, which is definitely not something I would have said maybe 18 months ago. Gage Wood has had a little bit of an interesting career path. Wehiwa, he wasn't always this guy that I think Hog fans viewed as a big-time prospect. He's from the state of Arkansas, and so we tend to like either underrate or overrate kids from the state of Arkansas when they're coming through the ranks. And baseball's developed some pretty good prospects here lately. But Gage Wood's a guy that, again, I don't think Hog fans realize what level of prospect he was up until about the last few months when you started to really see his name fly up those boards. I need you as a smart person to explain to Hog fans how someone like Gage Wood, obviously the no-hitter in the NCAA tournament, having all these performances he had down the stretch help, but even before the NCAA tournament, he had raised his draft profile a big leap, even with only throwing a handful of innings. What did you guys see? I mean, you specifically, but also MLB teams and other observers. What did you guys see out of Gage Wood in those limited innings to start the year that made him jump up on those draft boards before he even really proved he was going to be capable as a starter?
So he was a guy that, you and Arkansas fans and a lot of other people, probably had circled a little bit coming into this year. He threw the ball well last spring, 56 Ks to just 8 walks and 40 1/3 innings. And then, not to beat a dead horse, he also threw the ball well on the Cape. I think across 19 innings, had 29 Ks to 8 walks and a 1.4 ERA. And then, this year was this year, for lack of better phrasing. I mean, he really popped. I think he ended up with 69 strikeouts and 37 2/3 innings, 3.8 ERA. And then obviously the no-hitter in Omaha was not just one of the best college performances or College World Series performances, but that's about as good as you're going to get at the amateur level. 19 Ks, 1 base runner allowed as the hit by pitch in the 8th inning. I mean, that was really, really special. And I don't think that anyone's going to forget that for really, as long as they live. But, back to kind of what makes Gage Wood. And he's not a one-trick pony, but his fastball is one of the best of its kind in this year's draft. And I know that's high praise, but it's a legitimate 70 grade pitch. It sits in the mid to upper 90s. It explodes out of his 5'5" release height. Again, it's been up to 98. It's got plus carry through the zone. And then unsurprisingly, it's at its best when he locates it in the top half of the zone, gets over the barrel of opposing hitters, generates tons of empty swings. And his advanced feel for the pitch also plays in its favor because it allows him to optimize its traits. And, back to my point, it allows him to command it well in the top half of the zone, generate whiffs with it. And then this spring, I think it had an outlandish 42% whiff rate, a 32% chase rate. And I think his in-zone miss rate was like 29%. And then his, he's not a one-trick pony, as I said. So, I mean, he's got a low to mid-80s power curveball that also flashes plus. It's got a ton of depth and sharp downward tilt. And, like his fastball, his curveball also generates plenty of swing and miss. And I think this spring it had like a 38% or a 40% miss rate. And then he rounds out his arsenal with a mid to upper 80s slider that's also solid. But the fastball with him is really special and kind of makes him a unicorn. Like, you look at the velo and kind of the surface level numbers, and that makes it a really impressive pitch in and of itself. But when you go under the hood a little bit and dive even further, like he has a really flat vertical approach angle, and you couple that with the 5'5" release height, and it creates this almost like rise ball, skee ball effect. And you combine all of that with his command for the pitch, the velo, all these under the hood traits. It's a really special offering. And he's kind of I don't think he'll go like 8th overall, sort of how Cade Horton did a few years ago, but it's been that kind of ascent for Wood dating back to, I don't know, April or early May, culminating with his no-hitter in the College World Series. Like, for me, he's a no doubt first rounder right now.
Yeah, I think that no-hitter, I think I said it in the moment. I was like, I feel like this, like, obviously it's not a direct meritocracy. It's not just you pitch well, now you're going up. But I felt like after that game and given the high-profile stakes of it, I was like, this feels like this solidified him as a first-round pick, which, again, like, even 4 months ago, if I had come on this podcast and been like, Gage Wood, first-round pick, Hog fans would have lit me up and been like, you're overrating him. All he throws is a fastball or whatever. And I'm like, okay, relax. But no, he's definitely a guy that, again, I don't know if I ever would have said he was going to be a first round pick, but going back to his freshman year, he was getting like the fastball. You could see the makings of what it is now. Even as a freshman, when he was 92 to 94, getting a lot of swings and misses at the top of the zone, and the competitiveness of Gage Wood too. And when he really gets that confidence about him, and I think that's really the biggest. Obviously, the stuff has gone to a different level, but just his command and his confidence and his belief in himself has taken everything in his arsenal to a different level. But I mean, yeah, even as a freshman, you could kind of see when he'd get rolling, you're like, wow, there's a legitimate like polar, like a dominant stuff here. And so it's been really cool to see him kind of put it all together. And really, I think he's just scratching the surface, because I mean, this guy, what he throw 28 innings, 30 innings this past spring, like he's gonna get a little bit more seasoning and get real reps as a starter. I feel like he's going to be an interesting one to follow. Zack Root, I don't know if you could come up with a more different arsenal, Gage Wood to Zack Root, like just very different. Not that Zack Root's not, we even every now and then he'll throw a fastball 97, and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot he can do that. I forgot he does have that in him. But Zack Root, very different approach to pitching, very different just arsenals, command, mentalities, everything. I imagine in your line of work, you have to do a lot of kind of projection, of course. That's what all this is projecting how good these guys are, what are their traits, how will they play long-term. With a guy like Zack Root, because obviously I'm sure you watched him a little bit at ECU, probably more than we did even. When he transferred to Arkansas, how much benefit of the doubt did you maybe just give where you're like, all right, left-handed pitcher who's got all these traits, I know what the stuff is, now he's going to Arkansas and working with Matt Hobbs, and I just saw Matt Hobbs turn Hagen Smith into a demon. When you saw him transfer to Arkansas, did you have a feeling right away like, okay, this is probably going to work out?
Yeah, I thought it's hard not to right away when you see a pitcher commit to Arkansas, especially someone the caliber of Root and what he had done at East Carolina for 2 seasons, and not be really excited about the developmental pairing between an arm like that and Coach Hobbs, who does an exceptional job. And he showed why this year. I think he had 126 Ks and 99 or so innings, a 3.6 ERA. And like you said, completely different arm than Gage Wood, but another high quality guy. I think what stands out to me with Root, is the compete level. Like he really pitches his tail off and has that visible bulldog mentality when he's out on the mound. Like he is not scared of anyone. When the lights get brighter and kind of the stage gets bigger, I feel like that's when he thrives and is at his best and is just in full on attack mode. And I think that's either a quality that you've either got it or you don't. And I think that it's really special that he has it, because you can't teach it. So I think that's going to serve him well. It obviously served him well this year, but that's going to serve him well throughout his, what I think will be a lengthy professional career. But fastball, like you said, it'll sit in the low 90s, and he'll rear back and grab a 95, 96, or 97. I think he was even up to a 98 this spring with some arm side life. It doesn't get a ton of whiffs. So I'm curious to see how that pitch is kind of tinkered with as he progresses through pro ball. But with him, the calling cards are his secondary pitches. The bigger curveball is above average, and then his changeup has long been a plus pitch and has kind of long been his bread and butter and moneymaker. And then he'll also mix in kind of a shorter cut slider kind of deal. That's also a really effective off-speed offering. So, I mean, he's got a deep arsenal, throws all 4 for strikes. He's a left-handed pitcher, left-handed starter at that. I don't think he will quite end up hearing his name called in the first round in a couple of weeks, but in the sandwich picks is you could call him, or early in the second round. I think that makes a lot of sense for Zack.
Hey, you mentioned the competitiveness, and I think that leads me to like another facet of his game that I just love. And I think every great pitcher kind of has to have this ability, because I mean, it's like driving a Ferrari a little bit. It's like you can't just be full blast all the time, especially as a starter, mixing speeds and all that. He seems to have this innate ability of like knowing each at bat, what tools he needs to get through it and what he needs to do. And you mentioned him touching 98. I can tell you exactly when he touched 98. It was when he was facing Andrew Fisher in the Super Regional. Yeah. He was I'm not kidding. He was 93, 95 the entire day. And then Andrew Fisher comes up with 2 outs, and all of a sudden it was like 97, 98, 98, 98. It was just like peppering him at the top of the zone. And it's like he does seem to have this, and the competitiveness is a big part of it. I think a lot of times teams would, if you're a team that has 3 lefties or whatever that are platooning, they would always kind of load up righties against Zack Root. And I think it pissed him off, because you mentioned the changeup. That's probably might be his best overall weapon, is the changeup. And so it's kind of like one of those things where he's like, all right, yeah, put this righty that's hitting 220 in the lineup and see if I don't just completely dice him up. I think it's very interesting. I want to put you on the spot here for a little bit, because I think about with Zack Root, like, I don't know what his ceiling is as a pitcher, but I know his floor is insanely high. You just don't have all the traits that we just talked about, the stuff arsenal. He throws a ton of strikes too. Like, there's not really a command question, and he kind of has enough skills to where I'm just like, this guy will make it work. Of the pitchers in this draft class, who do you feel like are the ones that are best equipped to, I don't know, maybe not rise quickly through an organization, because that ends up usually being a reliever, but at least starting pitcher wise, who are some of the other starters in this class that you think are equipped to just kind of adapt right into pro ball and could maybe quickly advance through a system as a starter?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question, because I think fast mover, especially depending on where he goes, Liam Doyle could move really quick. But then the other part of that question is, you mentioned as a starter, and the jury is still out on him long-term as a starter. He's obviously got this rocket ship fastball. That's another double plus pitch. He dominated with that pitch alone all of this year, but how he does it is a little unorthodox. It's really high effort. The split change is, I think, better than people give it credit for and better than people realize, but the secondary stuff will need to take a step forward. So Liam Doyle could move the fastest, but in terms of guys who I feel really confident in sticking in a rotation, Cade Anderson, Jamie Arnold, Kyson Witherspoon, I feel more confident about Gage Wood. I think he's a slam dunk to stick as a starter. We just talked about Zack Root, and Anthony Ianson. Those are kind of the handful of names that, at least early on in the draft, I feel really, I feel very confident hanging my hat on them and their ability to start.
I feel like there was a time like 3 months ago where it kind of felt like this was maybe, I don't want to say a down year for college starting pitching, but it was like you didn't have that like Skeens type of guy. You don't have that like 1-1 type of college starter, which we have had in a lot of these seasons. I wouldn't even say there's a Hagen Smith type of guy in this one, but there's like just 12 guys right there that are just good college starters that are in that same kind of mix. And you mentioned a lot of them right there. And I always think it is fascinating because Hog fans have asked me that 1,000 times over the past few months of like Hagen Smith, how quickly could he make it to the big leagues? I'm like, well, he could pitch. He could be a left-handed setup guy like right now, but is that really what the White Sox are going to want to do? Like, is that how they're going to approach it? I don't know. Speaking of arms, I want to ask you one last question about this year's draft class before we look ahead, because I think next year's draft class shapes up pretty well for Arkansas as well. We mentioned Wood, Root. I think Beidelshees will get drafted just off of being a lefty that, again, kind of checks all the boxes of a guy that would get drafted in that 7 to 10 round range. Christian Fouch will almost certainly get drafted just off of throwing 100. There's not really much else you need to figure out there. Are there any other arms from Arkansas that you kind of maybe have your eye on as like a guy that could get drafted? Parker Coyle, not listed on any lists. Ben Bybee, not listed on any lists. Aiden Jimenez, not listed on any lists. All three of those guys could be pretty key arms for Arkansas next year. Do you see a case for any other Arkansas pitcher outside of those guys that we've talked about, maybe being a guy that could be an intriguing prospect?
I mean, I think those three that you mentioned are candidates to get drafted and signed. But I think nowadays, in the age of NIL, I wouldn't be totally shocked to see one, multiple, or, perhaps even all three back next year in Fayetteville. That's not based on any sort of intel I've got. So I don't want to get Arkansas fans too excited. But yeah, I mean, I think that they very well could be back in Arkansas pitching for Coach Van Horn again next year. But at the same time, they are a little bit of a draft risk.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I lied. Last one, Justin Thomas Jr., just real quickly. I'm going to talk about our guy, Justin Thomas Jr. I don't know if there's a more loved, like unanimously loved player at Arkansas. Obviously, there's players that are better than Justin Thomas, but it's like in terms of just what Arkansas fans expected of him and what he's turned out to be, he is just a personality that everyone loves. We all secretly are hoping that he comes back to Arkansas, but I feel like he's in that 11 to 15 round. Like maybe he could get drafted, maybe he'll sign, maybe there'll be an NIL deal for him. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on him as a prospect? Because I think last year he kind of wanted to sign coming out of JUCO, didn't get drafted. There really wasn't any professional interest from him. I would imagine what he did this year at Arkansas helped him. Do you see any path forward for maybe some MLB interest from Justin Thomas Jr.?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to what his number is, what him and his kind of people have decided in terms of, what he would sign for and the signability there. But he's a really fun little player, and I'm preaching to the choir here, I think. But, every time, especially as the season went on and later on in the season, he just stepped up and made plays. And, there's a little bit of impact there. I think there's more performance than there is present tools. Maybe he's like kind of a vanilla ice cream with a little bit of sprinkles on top. But there's some thump, as I said. And he plays the game really, really hard. He plays it really fast. He loves to play. So he's another kind of toss up where I'm curious to see what ends up happening in a couple weeks and whether or not he returns.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's in it. I think Arkansas, as they're trying to build their portal class, it's like the big question mark. I didn't realize he would be this big of a domino, but it's like you're attacking the portal. It's like, do we have a hole at center field or not? Because if Justin Thomas is back, we very much do not. But it's like you kind of want to know for sure. And speaking of next year's class for Arkansas, so this time of year, you don't really see much. Like I say a lot of things where I'll be like, oh yeah, Ryder Helfrich, one of the top players in the draft. Gabe Gaeckle, one of the top players in the draft. There's some lists that make me think that and people I talk to, but like there's not really much to go off of. You don't have a ton of 5-round mock drafts for next year already. But as you look forward to next season, Ryder Helfrich, I would imagine, has to be near the top of the college catcher crop, right?
Yeah, absolutely. He had a breakout summer last year on the Cape, led the league in homers, carried that over into this spring. And, he hit above 315 home runs. He's a plus power guy, can really drive the baseball. We saw it last night or whenever this comes out in the first Team USA Stars versus Stripes scrimmage. He had a backside home run. There's real bat speed there. He's a strong physical kid. So, I mean, he will be a prominently ranked guy as the cycle progresses. Cam Kojal, another one, broke out during his time in Arkansas and will continue to hit 333 with 33 extra base hits. He's always had an advanced feel for the barrel, which he flashed this year, but he showed some more impact and the ability to drive the baseball more with regularity this spring. Kuhio Aloy is another one. So, I mean, those are kind of your big three. And I'm also excited about Nolan Souza. He got injured, I think, at like the worst time because he had just started to break out of, his really slow start and the slump he was in. And was going really good and was shaping up to have a productive end of the season. And then he hurts his shoulder. But I think that once he comes back and healthy next year, he's another player that I think is going to really excite Arkansas fans.
That really made me happy you throw a Nolan Souza in there. That Nolan Souza is like my guy. One, like just, covering him. And he was one of the, I think he was like Gabe Gaeckle was the first ever guest of the Baumbastic Podcast. That's aged pretty well as well. And we'll talk about him in a second. But Nolan Souza was one of the first ever guests of the Baumbastic Podcast. So he'll always be a hero to me for that. But also I love, I mean, you want to talk about tools for days. Like he's the most athletic kid on Arkansas's roster. Fastest, like without a doubt. They do. If you walk through the facility at Arkansas, they have the weight room there, obviously, and they have all these little boards that'll be like the top 5 broad jumps, the top 5 10-yard shuttles, the top 5, whatever, all the little like athletic things they do. Nolan Souza is just number 1 or number 2 in every single one of them. It's unreal, and I feel like he's one of those guys that the production hasn't quite matched it yet, and he hasn't even really tapped into his power, but I think he could be one of the biggest risers in next year's draft because I think there's just so much unknown, and he's got a lot to prove, of course, and the hit tool, certainly there's a lot of swing and miss there, but I have not sold my Nolan Souza stock, so I appreciate you throwing him in there for sure. But Gabe Gaeckle is one of the more fascinating ones where if we had this conversation maybe 3 months ago, it'd maybe be a very different conversation. He's kind of shown some signs of humanity this year as a sophomore, but I feel like by the end of his sophomore year, I almost feel better about him now than I did a year ago when he was coming off of this awesome lights out freshman year where he was dominant out of the bullpen. Now he's going to have to prove he can do it as a starter, but when you look at the stuff with Gabe Gaeckle, I would imagine it's still got to be pretty high up there in terms of the next year's class, in terms of the pitching crop, right?
Yeah, the stuff is really, really impressive. As you said, I think the biggest question for me, and I think what everyone's looking for, is can he do it as a starter? That was kind of his Achilles heel this year. They called an audible, moved him more to a bullpen role, first out role type of guy. But the stuff, man, it is really, really impressive. He's mid-90s fastball with carry up in the zone. And then he's got 2 distinct high spin breaking balls in this power mid to upper 80s slider with glove side life and some sweep. And then this bigger curveball with depth and sharp downward bite. And, he rounds out his arsenal with a changeup that's a real fourth pitch. It doesn't get a ton of separation off his fastball. I think it sits in the upper 80s, but it gets a ton of fade to the arm side and also generates empty swings. So, he's got 4 swing and miss pitches, 3 especially with the slider, curveball, and changeup. So, it's just going to be about whether or not he can start and how high of a caliber he can.
You mentioned with Gaeckle, like the ability to start, and I think it's fascinating, and I want to get your thoughts on this because usually when you're having this conversation about can a guy start, it's usually like the guy that is blowing his load early, like coming out there flamethrowing, and then can he hold that velocity, or can he face the lineup a third or fourth time, all those things. With Gaeckle, it's bizarre because he's shown an ability to do all of those things. He just threw 100 pitches in Omaha, 6 innings against LSU. Now, it was out of the bullpen technically, but it's like you look at the stuff, it's not like there's a question of does the stuff carry or can he face a lineup a third time? Like he's kind of answered those questions, at least I think, at least in some of his outings, like skill set wise. Is it just a mental thing? Like I just wondered for someone like you as a draft guy who really looks at this as a tools and skill set based game here, like how do you make sense of that when you have a guy that just for whatever reason it didn't work early this year as a starter? Now you've shown he can be stretched out and go lengthy outing. So clearly he has the skill set to be a long longevity type of guy. But what do you really make of that when it comes to Gaeckle?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think it's a question that a lot of people are kind of wondering and trying to figure out. Because you mentioned, he has success, in longer stints, specifically against LSU and going 6 innings and over 100 pitches and whatnot. So, for me, I do think that some of it is a little bit of a mentality thing and how he goes about his preparation and a comfortability thing. So I think that, whether it's this fall or this summer and whatnot, they'll try and work on it and hone it in because, he has the ability, and Coach Van Horn and the coaching staff saw it, which is why he was in there. He has the ability and stuff to anchor a rotation and an SEC rotation at that. So he's got a chance to do it next spring. I'm sure they'll give him every single chance under the sun to be able to, just looking at that pitching staff and, who's coming back and just the makeup of it. But he's an exceptional arm talent. And if he shows he can start at a high level in the SEC, he's going to go in a really good spot.
Absolutely. You mentioned some of the other top prospects for next year's draft. Cam Kozel certainly going to be an interesting guy for that development. Ryder Helfrich, of course. Wehiwa Aloy, I want to focus on him for a second because obviously he's got to play a position. I think that would really – it would be in his best interest, and I think the staff knows that. And Dave has done this before where, like, Kendall Diggs, they tried it a couple years ago where they were like, hey, the draft guys really want to see you play right field, go play right field and we'll see how it works. And then, of course, he had some injuries and other things that held him down. But Dave has kind of shown he'll do his guys a solid and maybe give them a chance to show the professional teams what they want to see. So we'll see if Aloy is able to play right field, but particularly with the bat, which is, of course, going to be the main attraction with him. Of course, there's some swing and miss, and he finished the year really struggling down the stretch. And so he'll have to answer some of those questions to an extent. But when you look at his career overall and you look at a guy that hit under 270 at BYU with 8 home runs, I believe it was, for him to up his game the way he did at Arkansas, does that give you any type of confidence of like, okay, this guy might, his arrow might still very much be pointing up? And of course, you'll probably have a chance to see him in the Cape this summer. But I guess just how intriguing is a guy like that who still feels like he's very early in his development?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's another testament to Coach Thompson and the entire staff and their ability to develop guys. Because you said he didn't really have an excellent freshman year at BYU. I think for a freshman, in a word, you'd call it solid. He hit 269 with 8 homers and 38 RBIs. But, for him to go from that to hitting almost 320 with Arkansas with 13 homers and 70 RBIs, almost doubling his production, that's really impressive. I mean, he can impact the baseball. There's plus raw power there. He does not get cheated at the plate, which I think everyone knows. I mean, he swings out of his shoes, it seems like, every time. And there's real bat speed there. And I think the key for him is going to be how much the hit tool progresses, because, I mean, there are real pitch recognition issues and some swing decision issues. He expands the strike zone. It almost looks like he kind of lacks an approach sometimes. But, that's something that they'll work on. And if I'm sitting here talking about it and yapping about it, that's the excellent coaching staff at Arkansas certainly knows it. So it's going to be something they hone in on. And he took a jump from his freshman to sophomore year. Now he's in Fayetteville full time. He's not going to transfer again. So, he's comfortable with the staff. I'm excited to see the leap he makes heading into 2026. But it's big time power, big time raw power. Impact is not a question. It's just, the hit ability and how short up that can get.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that, like, these guys are aware of these issues, because sometimes, you're talking to fans, it's kind of frustrating. Like, guy swings at a 1-2 slider in the dirt. It's like, hey, he shouldn't have swung at that. It's like, no shit. Yeah. You don't think he knows? Like, hey, yeah, I probably shouldn't have swung at that one. And so it will be interesting to see how he's able to develop. With Cahill, man, it's fascinating because, you mentioned his brother Wehiwa and how he's able to take that power. He has good power just in batting practice, but also it translates into the field a lot. Like, he hits to all fields, and for him to show up and kind of show that power in games is big. And Cahill had only 13 home runs. I say only 13 home runs compared to the 21 for Wehiwa. I think there's more raw power with Cahill. And I think going back to the fall, just kind of thinking of my first impressions of him, the coaching staff was, I think, I don't even think they realized how dangerous that bat really was. And, the power to all fields. And Wehiwa, I feel like, has kind of adapted and started to go the other way and hit for power to the opposite field. Cahill, it's almost natural, him hitting that ball to the right center gap and really barreling it up. And it seems to kind of like his swing works that way. You mentioned the potentially lack thereof of approach. That's what's so fascinating to me, is this guy can hit a ball 440 feet to right center field and not even really know how he did it or why he did it. It's just kind of one of those things. And so I think he's actually got more power than his older brother if you're just going from a raw juice standpoint. And so it's going to be fascinating. I'm excited to see you get a look at him this summer up there in your neck of the woods. I think it's going to be a big summer for his development to, one, if he's going to play a position, what does that look like? But also hit with a wood bat, show people he can do that. And speaking of, before I let you get out of here, what does your summer look like? Of course, you're going to be covering draft stuff, and you're up there in Boston. Are you just going to be watching a lot of games of the Cape? Are you traveling anywhere? What's it look like for you as a draft guru?
Well, I'm really lucky. My family has a house right on Cape Cod, so I'll be posted up here for the entire summer and grinding away and getting to as many games as I can, and keep trying my best to get a feel for the 2026 class and some 2027 guys. So I'm really, really lucky to be here. We're already well underway on the Cape, but the 2026 cycle is slowly getting rolling. So I'm excited for the last month and a half of the summer season. It'll be a blast, as it always is.
Absolutely, man. I have one request for you as you go on your journey. Hunter Dietz, if you see him this summer, I don't know how much he's going to throw this summer, maybe 5 innings, maybe 6. I just need one tweet that's like, hey, especially if he does something well, I just need one Hunter Dietz tweet. So he's thrown like 2 innings in his career at Arkansas. He is the most talked about pitcher at Arkansas that has never done anything, but he's just, he's such this tantalizing prospect and the stuff and all that. And he was such a big recruit coming out of high school. I just need one tweet that's like, hey, Hunter Dietz, strikeout, check this out. That'll save us. That'll give us like 9 months worth of content here at Arkansas. That's all I ask of you. But Peter, man, I appreciate you for doing this. This was awesome. I always love talking ball, always love talking Razorbacks, of course, but also getting to hear from a professional what you guys see from some of these guys at Arkansas and what all they need to do. And really interesting stuff, man. So I appreciate you for joining the Baumbastic Podcast, and enjoy your summer on the Cape, man. And hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. It was a blast. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, hope everybody enjoyed this edition of the Baumbastic Podcast. We will see you back tomorrow for some more action. Appreciate you, Peter Flaherty.